Hello my Beatles friends, welcome back to another video. We are approaching the end of the year, we are approaching Christmas and Happy New Year, and people are running and buying presents and so on. I visited a lot of record stores in the past week and some record fairs and flea markets, and just the overall vibe of Christmas already is here. And people asking me, how did you end up with so many records, and how can you collect so many records, and how much does it cost, and all discussion, things like that. And I have an idea of a video for today's video, how it all began. I mean, what you see here, so many records, how people get to having this, and how people are ending up with this, and what makes people want to collect so much and hanging everything on the walls. I mean, now when you are already a experienced and established collector, you always think about the origin, how you got it. So in this video, I want to show you 7 essential albums that every collector must have in his collection, that these 7 essential albums could be a starting point for every collector. In my case, these are the 7 albums that started my collection. These are the 7 albums in my life that came very early in my life that made me wanna start collecting records. As you all know, I've said it a million times on my channel that I was born in Soviet Union in Georgia, and everything was prohibited. So we heard here and there on TV some clips, some cuts, some radios. We were recording it on VHS tapes, which I will get to later. And there were some songs by the Beatles. So my mother saw that I'm developing a taste for Beatles, and she bought me this. This is the very first album in my life, and she just bought it to just to make me listen to the Beatles songs officially, not cut on the radio, not some beats on the TV, not some bad quality VHS recording, and so on. So this is the first album ever in my life. Now this one actually led to this one, but it came a bit later. And there were also some Paul McCartney records back in USSR, Flowers in the Dirt. This all came later. But this one is the first one. And I kept it because that was the only thing we could listen to Beatles. There was nothing else. So this is the first ever album in my collection. This is the beginning of the Beatles. And one song is missing actually, but anyway. Then by the late 90s, when Soviet Union was not so strict anymore. By the end of the 80s it was also like that, but I was only 7 years old. 90s, when I was already 8-9 years old, I began to listen to other things, and Queen were very popular at that point. And the Soviet Union Melodia label released this album, and my aunt bought it and brought it to me. So this was the very first introduction of me to Queen, and I didn't even know who was who. I thought he was the drummer, he was the singer, and who's this guy with the mustache? He doesn't look like a rock star to me at all, but this one is the cutest one. So that was my thoughts, initial thoughts, yeah. But then, of course, I was mistaken. This is the singer, bass player, and oh, of course. So this was the first introduction, and when I heard Bohemian Rhapsody first, I didn't like it. I mean, many songs, many albums that I listened for the first time I didn't like. But I liked We Will Rock You, and I liked We Are the Champions. Of course, 1 year later, Freddie passed away, and I already knew who he was, and the song Show Must Go On came later. And, those clips and videos were shown, and the Greatest Hits 2, there was a VHS cassette tape, which was very popular. So on the TV, they were showing that very often. But that was the very first album of the Queen in my life, and this is the second album in my life. Also, with this album, my aunt gave me the Beatles love songs, but it came later. So the Beatles was already established, so the Beatles were already inevitable. All the albums came later, but this one is the first in the Queen collection. Then came something very interesting. As I mentioned, my mother was recording a lot of video clips on the VHS tape, my father as well, and we had Paul McCartney's Give My Regards to Broad Street, Yesterday, and Here Then Everywhere, and also we had some Michael Jackson, Bad, and some other things. And among others, there was one woman singing a very interesting song, which I didn't know what it was at all. Turned out to be this was a part of the movie from Jesus Christ Superstar film from 1972, and the song was called I Don't Know How to Love Him, sung by Yvonne Elliman. And she also participates in the original cast. And I always wanted to listen to that song. Where did that from? So I found that it was here. And for some coincidence or some, I don't know why, I was given the original cast. Now here in the original cast, the part of Jesus Christ is sung by none other than young Gillan. And I remembered his voice, very distinct voice. I mean, from here on the VHS tape recording from the TV, we heard only one song. We didn't hear Jesus Christ's voice from this album, which is sung by Ted Neely. I didn't know that. I only found out about him in the late 90s. But I got this one. Somebody gave it to me, recorded on a cassette tape, and I listened to the whole thing. And then I recognized that song. Of course, the performance from that song from this album in the movie is different, but it's the same voice. But I remember listening to Jesus Christ parts and the Gillan solo performance, I Only Want to Say, Guesstimate, and I remembered that voice. And later, when people let me listen to Smoke on the Water by the Deep Purple, I was like, wait a second, this is Jesus Christ's voice. And they told me, yes, that's young Gillan. He is from the band called Deep Purple, and there was an album called In Rock, Child in Time, and Tim Rice, the writer of this musical, he heard him and he invited, and this story. But my first ever introduction to young Gillan and Deep Purple came through here. And this is the essential album in my collection, and I've listened to it all my life. And I can sing all the lyrics by heart, I don't need the music. I know it so well. So this is the inevitable part of my music collection of my life. This musical is one of the best things I've ever heard. And performance by all the musicians, especially Murray Head and young Gillan, is just unbelievable. So this is one of the most important albums in my life, which led me to liking Deep Purple. That's important. Then we moved from Georgia to Israel. And the album that we actually bought in Georgia, we took with us to Israel on the cassette, and we lost it, was this one. This was the first John Lennon album I have listened to in its entirety. I mean, I had Paul McCartney's Flowers in the Dirt and Back in USSR, and I had only one song on the EP, which is called Imagine. Yeah, there was a song called Imagine. But this was the first album ever, the entire that we listened to. And we moved to Israel in the chaos of moving and things. We lost the cassette, but we had the paper and all the insert, and that is lost as well. So this one was the first John Lennon ever album that I listened to in its entirety, and it was after I was told that 10 years ago he was killed. And I still have the newspaper cut out from 1990 from the newspaper called Komsomolskaya Pravda, when it says that 10 years ago he was killed. So this album was really popular at the time. It was sold everywhere. And we bought it in 1993, I believe, and we lost it in Israel in 1994. So I remember this album essentially, and I remember listening to the songs like Woman, one of my favorite songs. So this one, started my John Lennon solo collection. Then in 1995, when I was already, free, we had a freedom of buying new music and anything we could in Israel. My brother brought me 2 CDs. Peace. And I said, what is that? I mean, I never saw it in my life. I never heard it. And when I put the first song, he started screaming. I said, "What? Take it away from it." And he told me, "Shut up, listen." He brought me 2 albums. Now you'll be laughing. Just hold on. You'll be laughing. He gave me these 2. Led Zeppelin 4 and Pink Floyd Wish You Were Here. Initially, I didn't like them, and I thought to myself, this album, it didn't start until the 2nd minute. He said, "Yeah, it's Pink Floyd. They have a delayed start." Okay, but this one started screaming from the note 1, and I said, "What is that? I mean, I don't follow." But then I listened to Stairway to Heaven, and I remember listening to the Stairway to Heaven like whole day, non-stop on repeat, and my brother began laughing. So that was very bizarre and strange introduction to these 2 albums and to these 2 bands. And the next album I listened from Pink Floyd was actually Atom Heart Mother, and the last ever I listened to was Dark Side. This one took me longer to understand. I like the Stairway to Heaven, but the rest of the songs, it took me quite some time. And not until I met somebody in school who was also a fan of Led Zeppelin. He told me, "You know that song? You know that song?" I said, "No, I don't. I don't." And I was really embarrassed because I do have those songs on my CD, but I never listened to it. So I went back home and listened to everything again to be, up to date. So these 2 albums, introduction happened in 1995 thanks to my bigger brother. And then already when I was experienced Beatles collector and I knew some rock bands, I thought I knew. I wanted to listen to Guns N' Roses and all those bands. And my brother's friend, he said, "No, I don't have Guns N' Roses, but if you want to listen to something heavy, I can recommend something." And I remember he gave me a disc, and I had a Discman that day. Those days you were listening to Discman. You put a disc, you put it in your pocket, you put some headphones, and you are a cool guy, So he gave me this album, and I remember not liking this album at all. But then I was bored, and I forced myself to listen to it. And from that day, this album is one of my favorite albums ever. This is Jethro Tull's Aqualung. This one started my interest in prog rock. And I think if somebody has those 7 albums in their collection as a starters, you have no choice. It's inevitable you become a collector, just like you see here. Okay? So these were the 7 albums in my collection that I started my vinyl collecting. That I said, okay, I want to collect all the music on physical media and everything that has to do with it. And here comes a little bonus for you. Something that I mentioned a lot of times on my channel, but I never showed actually. In 1989, when my aunt gave me Queen and Love Songs, she also gave me a single. Well, that's not a single, that's an EP. And this is this one, made in Riga, on Melodia label. And here we have 4 songs. Painted Black, As Tears Go By, Ruby Tuesday, and Lady Jane. Of course, these are Rolling Stones. These are the first ever 4 songs by Rolling Stones that I've ever listened to. And I said I want to have some other songs by Rolling Stones because I like the sound. And that's what hooked me into buying new Rolling Stones albums. And that's why I love early Rolling Stones songs. All right? So, thank you very much for watching. These were essential, must-have, the best rock albums in my collection, in my case, that's made me want to collect the records. Here you see Beatles, here you see solo Beatles, Germans, UK, here you see other countries, here also other countries, here on top you see all the bands from A to Z, AC/DC, Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, Ronnie James Dio, Doors, Zappa, Yes, Pink Floyd, Genesis, Rolling Stones. Yeah, everything that you see here started from these 7 albums. The essential, inevitable albums. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. The next video is going to be on 20th of December. Maybe something will be earlier, but it's going to be a Beatles Christmas Flexi dive in. All the information that I can get on Beatles Flexis. Tomorrow is going to be a new video. Tomorrow is going to be 50th anniversary of Pink Floyd's Wish You Were Here album listening, and I'm going to be in Berlin listening to this album in Dolby Atmos in the hall. So stay tuned. I will try to make a video there and see how it goes. See you. Bye bye.